Struggling to pay rent, the protagonist of the story takes a shady job at a doll factory, not knowing anything about it, other than acting as an inspector, observing and inspecting the quality of the dolls before they are packed and ready to be shipped to the customers. Despite not knowing about this job, this factory has had a bad reputation with many rumors going around, but the protagonist only cares about getting some money now and making ends meet. He is simply desperate and ready to do anything. As he enters the factory, which is called Sweet Cheeks Doll Factory, he can't help but feel an unsettling sense of dread and isolation, as the place, despite being large, feels claustrophobic and there is no one to greet him. Instead, having his first shift, he gets an intercom message guiding him through a step-by-step instruction on what he needs to do. It's clear he is being observed in real time, as when he completes his first task of putting the uniform on, the intercom speaker instructs him to go to the workshop, meaning he is being watched from afar. This is already a red flag that he is the only person working in the factory, with the seniors not present to show him around in his first shift even. This reminds me of those movie scenes where the scientists are interacting with a live test subject from outside of a box and having integrated gloves. It gives some sort of a dreadful feeling that whatever is about to happen to the protagonist is something the organization doesn't want to happen to them. Before going to the workshop, the protagonist starts being nosy and opens another open locker, where he finds a note. The note reads through the perspective of the writer in a daily journal form that they are having their first shift and hoping that they won't mess up like many other jobs that they lost. They hope to also meet some colleagues. This already gives us clues to what this factory is all about. They seem to hire failed individuals or people desperate for a job who would take anything just for some money. They clearly have built a bad reputation that majority of people try to avoid, who have leaned towards hiring vulnerable individuals whom they can do anything to that they want. We then find a strange photograph. The footing reads the employee of the month, but the face and the name is scratched, looking as if being a doll. As the new recruit goes to the workshop, he reads the brief, which explains that the dolls need to be picked up and their quality must be inspected. If they seem fine, they need to be placed on the approved conveyor, but if they don't pass the quality, they must be immediately thrown into the disposal chute. Just then, an obscured person in a glass office from above announces himself, being the person on the intercom, telling the protagonist to start his shift by pressing the green button and hoping that he won't fail as the previous employee. Getting busy for a while examining the dolls and throwing ones that don't pass the quality check, the person engulfed in shadow in the glass office then interrupts the protagonist, explaining that he needs to keep the doors shut at all times. It just goes without saying that the protagonist is used as an experiment and is expendable, someone who can be easily replaced. Whatever they are doing in the factory seems to be dangerous, and that is why they want the doors shut so nothing gets out to harm themselves. But whatever happens to these desperate individuals who take this job, they simply do not care. The protagonist doesn't find this suspicious and continues on working, inspecting the dolls for any defects. This is when strange things start to happen. He starts seeing a doll moving and shutting a door which was opened and a doll impaled with many nails, which causes the power playing up. He starts feeling uneasy and a little scared, yet he doesn't feel completely alone as he knows that he is being observed from above by this person. He doesn't know what to think about these anomalies, so he continues working. He obeys the rules and continues on without failure until he sees a familiar doll appear out of blue right in front of his eyes. The doll impaled with nails appears even though he disposed of it earlier. Shocked to see the doll, he follows the rules and disposes of the doll yet again. All of a sudden, all the lights go off with the emergency red lights turning on. The person in the glass office then speaks on the intercom, instructing the protagonist to follow the emergency lights and turn the generator back on, which has randomly turned off. Just before that, the protagonist finds a note from the same person that he found a note from earlier, someone with the initial K, explaining how he has been working in the factory for over a week now at this point that he has written the note and hasn't seen anyone working there apart from him. More and more red flags appear, but for a brokey protagonist, nothing can scare him anymore than his landlord asking for the rent money. So he bites his tongue and goes on to turn the generator on and mingle amongst the hostile-looking hunted dolls. As he goes down to find the generator, he comes across a floor which is stained by blood trails and an eerie moaning sound. Nothing makes sense at this point, and the protagonist's life seems to be in danger. But he doesn't care and continues on. In the depth of all this horror, he finds another note from Kay. Kay writes how his duty is not only to inspect the dolls, but slowly they have asked him to maintain the machinery as well, such as the generator and the conveyor belt. After turning on the generator, all the blood trails disappear, as if the protagonist was imagining it all, or as if it was a detailed illusion. That's when he finds another note from Kay. They have mentioned that they are losing their mind from the isolation, feeling as if the dolls are more alive than them. It was clear from the first note that Kay was a very social person who craved it and needed it, saying how they want to meet new colleagues or friends, but the isolation seems to be taking a lot from them, making them lose their sanity. After it's done, the intercom announces that the shift for today is over, and the protagonist is expected to come back tomorrow. In the screen message, we read that the protagonist talks to himself how he feels that there's something strange about the place, but he cannot put his finger on it. I don't know what to say about that. He witnessed a lot of paranormal events and saw dolls moving and making sounds on their own. He hallucinated seeing blood trails and so many red flags from the notes that he found. I don't know what he says about not being able to put his finger on the strange feeling that he has. At this point, he has enough experience to put his entire hand on it. Returning the next day, the protagonist is instructed to grab a bucket as the ceiling in the workshop is leaking a bit. Going to the utility room, he finds another note from Kay, who starts questioning his role in the factory. He explains that the director, the person in the glass office, knows exactly when the slightest mistake is made in inspecting dolls for defects and when they are wrongfully placed in the chute. He doesn't know what the real purpose behind them being there is. That is a very good question, but something the protagonist doesn't care for much, as he likes the money that he's receiving. The new line of the dolls have voice boxes placed in them, so the voice messages need to be checked that they don't say anything inappropriate. In the employee room, we find a new photo labeled as the Director of the Month, with the photo of the ambiguous man in the glass office. In a way, this suggests that there are many directors and this person overseeing the protagonist is exchangeable as well, unless they are an authoritarian organization where they praise one person only, even though there is no competition. Examining the dolls, the director communicates with the protagonist that at certain points through the shifts, certain customers ask for customized dolls, which we will have to sort out. Soon enough, we come across another note from Kay, who starts displaying their concerns about the dolls and the surreal events in which they move on their own. Kay questions themselves if they are seeing things, as they have been working in a large factory in isolation for some time now. Maybe the isolation is getting the better of them. After examining some more dolls and shipping customized dolls to clients, the conveyor belt stops working all of a sudden, with the director asking the protagonist to go to the assembly room and fix the issue. As he does so, he sees a figure in the distance in the maze-like assembly room, a figure shrouded in darkness and shadows. He seems similar to the director. As he approaches the figure, it disappears into the thin air, making the protagonist feel uneasy. His suspicions and concerns are validated as he finds another note from Kay, who explains that they are feeling like being watched, as the director from the glass room is the only person that they are in contact with after a few weeks of work. A person whom they haven't even met in person, but someone they hear from the loudspeaker. Another note by the internal conveyor belt then unveils Kay has never seen any delivery trucks bringing material into the factory, making them really baffled how the factory even runs. Unblocking the conveyor belt, which is blocked by some dolls, the protagonist returns to the workshop and continues inspecting the dolls. After inspecting some more dolls and experiencing some more paranormal events, the shift comes to an end, and the director asks the protagonist to leave and come back tomorrow. As he takes the bucket and goes to the employee's locker room, he finds blood smeared all over the place with a writing warning the protagonist not to come back tomorrow. The protagonist, being a brokey, doesn't seem to care, as he is getting real good money from this job. Despite this, as he leaves the factory, he thinks to himself that there is definitely something surreal about this place, and even though he wants to tell himself it's just his mind playing tricks, he cannot shake off this bad feeling. Going to the factory the next day, the director happens to be absent, leaving a note behind with new instructions. As of today, it is mandatory for the recruit to repair dolls missing limbs or hair rather than throwing them into the trash. As the protagonist goes to the repair shop to fix dolls, he finds another note from Kay. Kay seems to have found out from archives that this factory was famous for making very detailed dolls, but it burned down 20 years ago. So what is this factory in its place? Has it been rebuilt, and if so, why there's no information about it publicly? Receiving a fax about a special order for an unusual and surreal doll, the protagonist delivers it through the fulfillment room and then subsequently finds a note from Kay. It reads that they had a similar experience, getting trapped in the fulfillment room, and the only way out is through the elevator shaft where the boxes are placed. The protagonist is left with no other choice and gets in when all of a sudden he sees the doll that he delivered in the box appearing right in front of him when the shaft closes. Arriving in a dark, strange place filled with boxes, the protagonist tries to find his way to the workshop when he finds himself in a place with an endless ceiling and boxes of dolls piled on top of each other, stretching to heights that are not even visible with naked eyes, as if reaching skyscrapers with endless tips. This defies reality and clearly shows it as something from dreams or imagination coming true. Trying desperately to find an exit back to the workshop, the protagonist gets lost in the maze the factory is. Spending some time in the maze, somehow feeling like he's going in circles, the protagonist finds another note from Kay, instructing him to follow the blinking light and to not let them catch him. This already seems like the last straw for working for this company. I personally would be very baffled if the protagonist gets back to work the next day if he survives this day. Traveling through this impossible and surreal factory rooms and corridors, a place with architecture defying reality, he falls into a pit filled with boxes, cushioning his fall when eventually he reaches the workshop. The protagonist then does something which is even more bizarre and mind-boggling than all the experiences that he had so far, which is going back to the workshop and continuing to work. At this point, I'm speechless, and maybe, after all, he deserves what's happening to him. After some time, the shift comes to an end and the protagonist leaves. He thinks to himself that every inch of his body is telling him to run and never return to the factory. But something gravitates him towards this place, something he cannot explain. Well, that might be why he keeps going back. A strange and mysterious feeling, a feeling that defies logic and instincts. Returning the next day, new instructions follow that each doll needs to be x-rayed as some might have foreign objects within them. As the protagonist looks around in the workshop, he finds a note left behind by Kay, who explains that they are going to directly communicate with the protagonist and they don't want the director to notice. Finding more left behind notes from Kay, he describes a strange experience that he had, that one of the dolls looked like them and they disposed of it. They then continue that they don't recognize themselves in the mirror anymore, as if something has changed in them. Something the director knows about but doesn't utter a word of. More notes from Kay appear to unveil the backstory of this factory, explaining that no one has ever heard of Sweet Cheeks and that there's no information about it anywhere. All of a sudden, a doll comes out of the conveyor, which starts talking directly to the protagonist, explaining that it is Kay and there's no time to explain anymore. Kay explains that they need to go somewhere private to talk.
Hey, it's me, Kay. Look, I know you're shocked, but there's not time for that.
That's when he reveals that he used to work here and slowly he transformed into a doll. This is something that would happen to the protagonist as well if he doesn't stop it. Apparently, as soon as the protagonist entered the factory, the surreal nature of this place already put its grip on the protagonist, so not showing up would only make things worse. So now, the protagonist needs to follow Kay's instructions in the following days to head it at its core, the factory, and stop his transformation. Putting Kay through the conveyor belt and approving him, he is consumed by thoughts and concerns. He continues working not to raise any suspicions. The shift comes to an end and the protagonist returns the next day, which at this point feels strange, feeling as if he has been here longer. Is it the 5th day, or is it still the same day, or has it been months? The protagonist is not sure anymore. He keeps on hearing whispers that he shouldn't be here, as if it all makes sense now that these dolls might be other people trapped here trying to warn the protagonist to save himself. After another surreal day at the factory, the director tells him to leave as it's the end of the shift. In his mind, the protagonist thinks that he cannot stop thinking about the factory and feeling it, as if it has already taken a hold of him. He feels the doll's eyes and the factory as if he belongs there. As he returns the next day, he loses grasp of time, not knowing what day it is. The factory seems to have changed as well, with the doll display boxes being haphazardly placed all over and the factory sign being on the floor. The day seems off. As getting busy inspecting the dolls, he approaches the disposal chute when Kay comes out, pulling the protagonist in, telling him to go with him. He enters a place filled with doll parts, piles and piles of millions of them. They are being crushed and then burned to be destroyed. Going deeper into the disposal area, which seems like an unrealistically large place, we find an intricate prison system where many dolls are placed inside cells and some on suspended cages. That's where Kay explains that he was being controlled by a doll in the workshop and that he really wants to be a human again, apologizing to the protagonist as if he lied to him and used them in order to get what he wants. Eventually, bypassing some traps, the protagonist reaches a door labeled as the exit. As the protagonist enters the exit, thinking it might be the way out, he finds himself in a cage, faced with the director who explains that the protagonist did exactly as planned. It seems it had all been an elaborate ritual or trap, with the director working with Kay to trick the protagonist into doing this little escape routine to get into the cage and transform into a doll. Some sort of gas is then released and the protagonist finds himself on the very same conveyor belt that he inspected the dolls from. That's when he hears the director speak to a new recruit, telling him exactly what he told the protagonist before when being introduced to the job. He realizes that he has transformed into a doll, ready to be inspected by another employee. It seems as if the protagonist cannot speak, as he is limited to the features already in the doll. So that means when we saw millions of dolls, they were in fact once human who transformed into dolls. It's not clear if they were all humans before, or many have been. Kay is one of them who seems to have cooperated with the director in hopes of being returned back into a human. Certain dolls who defied the director seem to have been imprisoned. The ultimate goal of the company is not clear to why they turn humans into dolls. Maybe they have high-profile clients who demand realistic and human-like dolls or souls that are trapped in them. Alternatively, if we break down the boarded up door, we can access the director's office. There we find a voice recording where we hear the director inciting Kay to lure the protagonist into the disposal, as otherwise bad things will happen to him. We then find papers on different test subjects the company runs experiments on. We then find voodoo-like dolls which the director has been using to control humans who have turned into dolls. We find a doll resembling Kay, which we dispose of. This will help us in the ending, where we meet Kay thanking us for getting rid of this voodoo doll as it breaks the control that it had on him. We continue as normal until we reach the exit door. That's when Kay, who had the controlling grasp of the director removed from him, comes out from another door and tells the protagonist to enter this door. The secret room seems to be the gas room, which transforms humans into dolls. Kay tells the protagonist to turn the valve in order to redirect the gas. The protagonist then enters the exit door, where the director goes on a rant how all the dolls were once human, who have now become obedient and silent, something that he wants to do to the protagonist and add to his collection. That's when he tries to turn the gas on, but as it is redirected, it turns on the director himself and not the protagonist. This allows the protagonist to turn back and talk to Kay again. He asks the protagonist for help to turn him back into a human when they both leave the factory into freedom. So when earlier Kay told the protagonist to stay in the factory as that is how he can stop from turning into a doll, he was actually lying, as he was under the control and influence of the director, forcing him to say things that he didn't want to say. And now we have to wait for the full game to tell us what really happens to them. And that brings us to the end of the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, make sure to stay tuned for more by clicking on the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your host Star, thanks for being here, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.